Shalom Chavrim, I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live here on World Harvest Television Network. Been a pleasure to get to speak with you all these broadcasts we've done thus far. And again, we come back this week, only going to get to touch a little bit about where we left off last week, speaking about Israel's third intifada and how that is meeting with biblical prophecy. But things are happening so rapidly over in the Middle East, on Israel's border, that I felt very pertinent that I should come back to the subject there, because I'm afraid that Damascus, if it hasn't already fallen by the airing of this particular video, it is on the verge of a coalition of forces coming against President Bashar al-Assad. I titled this particular broadcast, "Does Anyone Still Stand for Truth?" May sound a little bit odd, but that's where we're going to go today. Let's go back, though, to where we left off last week when I spoke about Ezekiel chapter 35, verses 3 through 5. I specifically quoted verse 5 to you, and I want to read verses 3 to 5, at least so I don't leave you on a cliffhanger before we get a chance to really do an in-depth look at Ezekiel's prophecy. Listen to what he says. "And say unto it, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, O Mount Seir, I am against you. I will stretch out mine hand against thee, and I will make thee most desolate. I will lay thy cities waste, and thou shalt be desolate. And thou shalt know that I am the Lord. Because thou hast had a perpetual hatred, and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword, in the time of their calamity, and the time that their iniquity had an end." As I shared with you here last week, I told you about how that this is dealing, of course, with Israel and the time of their calamity clearly being seen in Daniel's prophecy, chapter 9, speaking about the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. But what a lot of people are not aware of is that the third intifada also has had the same consequence and was prophesied by the prophet Ezekiel that Israel would be thrown or hurled to the force of the sword as a weapon in two specific time periods, at the time of the end of their calamity and at the time that their iniquity should have an end. And Daniel literally prophesies of both these events, because he speaks about the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. That was the time of Israel's calamity. And then he also speaks about how that Israel's iniquity would have an end when we look at the 70 weeks of Daniel in chapter 9. And here we are in modern times. Israel has been gathered back in her homeland, and what is she faced with now? Another intifada, the third intifada, but in this case here, the fulfillment here of the prophecy of Ezekiel chapter 35, where Israel is being attacked by the power of the sword. As it says here, because thou hast had a perpetual hatred, and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, and the time that their iniquity had an end. So clearly it's the spirit of Edom, or the spirit of Esau, that has moved down through the ages. Because we remember the story that Jacob, when he comes back home, and he's so worried that his brother will kill him, they actually, to some degree, have peace between them. But it's that spirit that moves down. We're going to be going into that. I promised you I would. Can't do it today because of the seriousness of the news that's been breaking. I wanted to share with you some prophetic insights there. But it's something I definitely got to come back to, because the third intifada, using the sword in modern days at the very time that our iniquity is about to come to an end. Israel about to recognize her Messiah. And Yeshua is the only Messiah there is. There is no other. And I know that my brothers and sisters that are Jewish people living in the homeland would probably differ with me on that. At least many of them would. But there's also many that are coming around recognizing and believing that Jesus Christ truly is the Messiah that was overlooked for many years. Can't wait to get into that with you guys. But let's move on, though, and let's take a look at what things are going on right now. At least as of June the 27th, 28th is when I actually recorded this here of 2017. But I wanted to share with you some very troubling news that we're seeing coming out. As you may already know, that the United States had put out an article, and I believe it was on June 24th, stating they believed that Syria was preparing for another chemical attack against their own people. Britain's defense minister, Mr. Fallon, weighed in on that in an article that RT posted. Britain would back new U.S. airstrikes on Syrian regime targets Fallon actually states there. Again, this was published on the 27th of June. Let me share with you some of the things that he says that's quoted by RT News on the very issue of the U.S. actually going after Assad's government. Says here, Britain is absolutely ready to support retaliation by U.S. President Donald Trump against Bashar Assad in Syria, UK Defense Secretary Michael Fallon has said. The U.S. claimed on Monday that Assad was potentially preparing a deadly chemical weapons attack on rebel forces and threatened to hit back with new bombing raids. Fallon said action should be justified, legal, and proportionate, but said in those circumstances the UK's support for U.S. action by Trump would be unwavering. He added that the UK backed the U.S. missile strikes in April, which Trump ordered after an alleged chemical attack by Assad. As always in the war, the military action you use must be justified. It must be legal. It must be proportionate. It must be necessary. In the least case, it was. Oh, excuse me, as he stated in the last case, it was. If the American takes similar action again, I want to be clear, we will support it. That's very troubling, friends. Troubling indeed, because we're not seeing the evidence. There's not ever been a clear, definitive evidence that Bashar al-Assad has actually used chemical weapons against his own people. Before I go into that, let me show you how Russia responded to the U.S.'s latest threats of doing a strike on Assad's forces. This came out on the Duran.com June 28, 2017. Maria Zakharova, the Foreign Ministry's spokesperson, stated here, or at least the article states here about her, the spokeswoman for the Russian Foreign Ministry has expressed concern over a statement from the White House press secretary, Sean Spicer, and American ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, threatening Syria with heavy military retaliation for a chemical attack that the U.S. says is being prepared. Both Spicer and Haley omitted to mention that, that according to the OPCW, Syria does not have any chemical weapons. Maria Zakharova wrote the following statement. We know from the past that George Bush regime has already used the falsification of facts on weapons of mass destruction in Iraq against its own people to carry out a military aggression against that country. We are seriously concerned over this. Rightfully so. And how many, including Britain, that has come out since the Iraq War and have apologized, basically, some of their own MK members have recognized, I should say, that they went to war without any justification against Iraq. I'm not saying that Saddam Hussein was a good guy by no means. I mean, he lobbed Scud missiles towards Israel, of course, during the Iraq War. He also was trying to genocide his own people, the Kurds, according to some reports that were coming out, using chemical weapons on his own people. But we were really looking at the fact that supposedly he had weapons of mass destruction, like nuclear bombs or something of this sort here, which there was never an evidence to support this. So where do we end up with all of this? Where are we headed to now with Syria's President Bashar al-Assad when there is an overwhelming evidence to the contrary? Now, the thing is, I've reported before on Israeli News Live, if you catch it, our broadcast on YouTube that comes out daily, practically every day of the week, we are covering breaking news stories that are happening. And we have shared with you the massive buildup, long before mainstream media even began to speak anything about this, that the U.S. coalition has been staging military equipment, Air Force, everything you can think of in Jordan, just below Syria there. We showed you how that the U.S. and British forces, along with the Jordanian forces, moved into contingencies just south of Dada, the city of Dada in southern Syria there on Jordan's northern border. We shared with you how that the U.S., through several big ships, sent weapons to Jordan, to their port in the Gulf of Aqaba. We showed you how that the U.S. sent a huge container full of military equipment, tanks and armored vehicles over to Lebanon for the Lebanese government to put that equipment on the border there. And now, even today, as we recorded this message just yesterday, Israel has closed off certain parts of the Golan, moving tanks and equipment on its own border, as they have stated, because they're concerned about a spillover of the war. It may be that Israel is going to work with the U.S. government to enter into to take down Damascus. We know, those of you, of course, we didn't bring this out last week, it hadn't happened as of yet, but Israel has already 3 times has struck the Syrian military. And it was oddly enough, the IDF reported that there was overspill, mortars and stuff coming into the Israeli territory of the Golan, and they retaliated, striking those sources as well as taking out Syrian tanks that were fighting against the Al-Nusra front near Quneitra, which is right on the border of Israel. So the thing is why is Israel getting involved in this? You have to understand, as a Jewish believer of the Messiah, I am full-heartedly in support of my people and my country to defend themselves, especially we know that we have problems with Hezbollah, we've had threats from Iran. I understand that. But when it comes to Syria, I cannot see a justification in this. And I'm more concerned that there are those that are in power in the Israeli government that have sided instead, they have sided with some factions on the outside of Israel in order to bring about the Oslo Accords of 1993 that is now on a new move right now of trying to be enforced in modern times. Joel Bannerman warned us, the late Israeli journalist, Barry Chamish the same, and even Chris Putnam as well has warned of the dangers that we face with Rome, as we did with the Maccabee brothers. The Maccabee brothers many years ago felt like that the only way we would ever be able to survive as a nation was to make an alliance with Rome. And it seems that Israel is doing this once again. This is nothing to say anything about our Catholic friends, by no means. But in every system, whether it be religious or governmental systems, there's good eggs and bad eggs. And this is where the danger is. And Israel is, I'm afraid, being influenced the exact same way, and being pressured to do things in a war that President Trump may very well undertake in the very near future to try to topple Bashar al-Assad. And I don't even think it's President Trump in this case. If you really want to know the truth, I think President Trump's hand is being forced by that shadow government behind, the military-industrial complex that knows that war is profit. That's why we titled the article the way we did. Needs to be some truth to be told about the things that are going on. Let's look at some more of the issues that are going on. As I stated already, we've showed you another broadcast as well on Israeli News Live on YouTube that clearly the U.S. set up their forces in Jordan, already crossed into Syria, set up a base in Al-Tanf. That base literally grows by the week. Norwegian special forces have crossed into there. The Dutch from Holland, they are moving in troops as well, have voted, haven't done it as of yet as far as I know of, but have voted to send in their troops into Jordan as well as a backup. The Germans from the Incirlik Air Base mid-July said that they would be moving their Air Force planes to Jordan as well, claiming that they don't trust Turkey. Well, Turkey is another issue altogether. Here on this article here from Aman's website, video, Turkish army tanks pour into northern Aleppo for humongous offensive. Now, the article here claims that they believe the offensive will be against the Kurds. I don't think it is. From the very beginning, I've stated that the coup that happened in Turkey, where President Erdogan blamed the United States for doing so, I believe was staged from the very beginning. It was never, ever, never, in my opinion, was the coup that Turkey did a legitimate coup. I believe it was used because why? Erdogan is a NATO partner. I had an inside source that shared with me that worked under Gulen Fagan, the very man that was claimed to be the mastermind of this coup, that told me from his own words that Erdogan was promised a great position with the New World Order if he was willing to do the dirty work. Well, it looks like he's doing the dirty work pretty well. So from the very beginning of the coup, I believe it was a setup for Russia. I can't say that Russia's a good guy either. Russia may be playing along with this for maybe at the greater good of the New World Order. But I do know for a fact from journalist friends of mine that know, for example, Maria Zakharova, the foreign ministry spokeswoman for the Russian foreign ministry, that she is dead set against the New World Order. I asked about Putin. She said, I cannot say so about Putin, but when it comes to Maria Zakharova and others in the government that she knew, they're all against the New World Order. But the situation that we're seeing is that Putin has been duped, no doubt, by Turkey with this fake coup. And it was used in order for the Turkish military to bring its tanks inside of Syria without the resistance of President Putin stopping them. And we see this also, not only the recent buildup in Aleppo, but remember when President Trump authorized the use of Scud missiles against Syria for the alleged chemical attack that was done on the civilian population that never had any backing, no proof whatsoever, and when Russia offered to send either their experts or the Syrian experts to go check, preferably the Russian experts, to check to see if the sarin gas was from the stockpiles that were confiscated, which by the way are in U.S. hands. The chemical weapons from the Syrian government are in U.S. custody and were supposed to be destroyed by the U.S. Whether or not it was from those stockpiles of sarin gas or not, and that Russia said that that was very doable. But U.S. declined, leading to more speculation that it was a cover-up from the beginning. There was no denying the fact that Syria did launch an attack on this area and that there was sarin gas used. But the question was it really Syria or not? I question it myself, and of course many experts have also done the same. But what is this being done for? When President Trump authorized the Tomahawk cruise missile attack on the Syrian air base where the alleged attack began at, Erdogan celebrated and said that Trump should have done more. Russia should have realized then that this was all a setup. And I really believe that they are setting up Russia to do what? They're trying to fake a millennial reign. I say they. This all has to do with what's going on with a covenant that's being formed in behind our backs right now with Israel. A covenant that's been in the works for more than 50 years, all the way back from 50 plus years ago, and even now in 1993 where Barry Chamish and also the late Joel Bainerman were exposing this covenant that's being formed with Israel as of right now. And I think in the bringing about this covenant, they want to bring in a false Messiah, an Antichrist. They want to manufacture the Gog of Magog war, written in Ezekiel 38. We're going to go into that a little bit later. I don't have the time today to get into that as much, but I believe this is what's happening. And this is why Turkey is amassing the troops. They're getting ready to fight against Assad as well. And they're hoping that Russia will back down, or if not, Russia will be taken out in their synopsis of this. All right, now let's look at another one here. When I said about the sarin gas, is there any proof that Syria used sarin gas on their own people? Well, this article here, it's an old article from December 14th of 2015. This is when a man named Eren Erdem, who is a parliament member of the Turkish government, came out and spoke to RT about sarin materials brought via Turkey and mixed in Syria ISIS camps. This is what Eren Erdem actually stated on RT News. And I have listened to the actual where he goes before, Eren Erdem actually goes before the Turkish parliament and is trying to get the parliament to do something about it, and goes so far as to even indict the Prime Minister of Turkey with the knowledge of allowing ISIS militants to take sarin gas and all the elements that they needed to make a sarin gas bomb inside of Syria. And as he pointed out, that this attack was done right about the time, or the release of these men that were allowed to go inside of the Syrian war front, all happened about the same time that the sarin gas first happened, and I believe that was back in 2014 or 2015 maybe. I forget the exact date on that. But let me share with you some of what was stated on this December 14th, 2015 article here. Islamic terrorists in Syria received all necessary materials to produce deadly sarin gas via Turkey. Turkish MP Eren Erdem has told RT, insisting there are grounds to believe a cover-up has taken place. The main opposition, Republican People's Party member Eren Erdem, brought up the issue for public discussion in the parliament last week, citing evidence from an abruptly closed criminal case. He accused Ankara of failing to investigate Turkish supply routes used to provide terrorists with toxic sarin gas ingredients. There is data in this incident. Chemical weapons materials are being brought to Turkey and being put together in Syria camps of ISIS, which was known as Iraqi Al-Qaeda during that time, Aaron Erdem told RT. Sarin gas is a military-grade chemical that was used in a notorious attack on Ghouta and several other neighborhoods near the Syrian capital of Damascus in 2013. The attacks were pinned on the Syrian leadership, who in turn agreed to get rid of all the chemical weapons stockpiles under a UN-brokered deal amid an imminent threat of U.S. intervention. As I stated, this is exactly what happened. And Mr. Erdem had the courage to bring this forth to the public's eye, but of course no one ever believed him. But what do we have as well? We even have the 21st Century Wire. They published this article here. U.S. Peace Council addresses United Nations in New York City. This was published on September 27th of 2016. The man you're looking at right here is Henry Lohendorf. Henry Lohendorf, he really laid it out exactly what was going on and called what is happening there a mass media propaganda. Now, Henry was just one of many of a group of U.S. Peace Council members that were a part of a delegation that went over to Syria. And they didn't just meet with the Syrian government, President Bashar al-Assad, but they also met with the opposition inside of Syria. I wanted to list to you some of the people and their credentials that were actually part of this council that also went on a fact-finding mission in Syria to come back, as well as we've had even American politicians that have gone over that come back to say the same thing. I believe in Ron Paul realizes that what we're doing in Syria as an American people is completely wrong and illegal for us to even be there. But we had Alfred Martyr, president of the U.S. Peace Council, went. Mary Compton, she was a member of the executive board of the U.S. Peace Council. Henry Lohendorf, a member of the executive board of the U.S. Peace Council, head of the Syrian delegation that went. Joel Jameson, member of the executive board of the U.S. Peace Council and member of the Syrian delegation. Madeline Hoffman, executive director of the New Jersey Peace Action, member of the Syrian delegation. And Donna Nasser, professor and lawyer, also part of the U.S. Peace Council, that went on this fact-finding mission. And by the way, each one of these members here funded their own way in going there. They spoke about the journalist Vanessa Beeley as being an astounding journalist, bringing out the facts of what's going on, exposing the corruption of the white helmets inside of Syria. There's others as well, other journalists that have brought these things to the public's attention. But we are completely inundated by an overwhelming amount of propaganda. But I wanted to share with you as well, there's some very important facts, and I've mentioned this before on Israeli News Live, but I wanted to share some of the very source that this comes from, because I've stated before, asking the question, what actually has happened? Because at one time, they were trying to make peace. Syria and Israel were finally trying to make peace. President Bashar al-Assad, there was an article on ynetnews.com, which is an Israeli news channel, said Assad will press Hamas to recognize Israel. Now this was back in 2010, as October the 14th, says Swedish Foreign Minister Carl Bildt told former Minister Yossi Beilin on Thursday that Syrian President Bashar Assad recognizes Israel and is willing to try and influence Hamas in this regard. During their meeting in Stockholm, Bildt quoted Assad as saying that Syria officially recognizes Israel, and this acknowledgement is part of the negotiations between the two countries. According to the Swedish Foreign Minister, the Syrian leader said he intends to convince Hamas to follow suit. Assad also said he believes the fact that Hamas Politburo is based in Damascus will help. According to Bildt, Assad reiterated the desire to resume peace talks with Israel under Turkey's mediation. The Swedish Foreign Minister told Beilin, and Assad appears sincere in his intention to reach an agreement. So what happened? Where did it go from there? Well, you know, here's what's interesting. The Duran put out an article recently called The Reasons and Perils of Israel's Dangerous Game in Syria. And what they go into is, why is Israel continuing to bomb certain areas near the Golan Heights? And the synopsis of the entire article really comes down to one thing, and that is that Israel considers Syria the hub that is allowing weapons from Iran to move into the hands of Hezbollah in Lebanon, which, granted, is a threat to Israel. Hezbollah has continually been a threat to Israel, and I realize that. And at the same time, since the Syrian war has been waging, Iran and Hezbollah both have come together to try to help Bashar al-Assad in defeating ISIS and that of the Free Syrian Army that's fighting against him, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, etc. So there is almost a conflict of interest in a way, even for myself, because I realize the threats that Israel faces from the other two countries. But to me, if we would to have been able to succeed in some kind of lasting peace, first make peace with Syria. But instead, we get articles like this that came out in Israel. This is an old article from 2016, though. The Times of Israel, Yolan says, I would prefer the Islamic State to Iran and Syria. Are you serious? Do you realize how evil ISIS is? We have Gatestone Institute, for example, says Yazdi girl exposes ISIS rape hellhole from May 12, 2016. The article that was brought out by her. This is one of her quotes here. We're almost finished for today, and I'll have to go into this next week. But Yazdi girls were sold in exchange for a few packs of cigarettes. They would come and take any girl against her will. If she refused, they would kill her on the spot. All quotes below from the Burvan and Shabab talk hosted by Yafar Abdul, March 22nd, 2016. Anyone who walked by our room and liked us would just say, let's go. She states. I read this story. It's horrible what these little children went through. Little girls sold for cigarettes. You know, does anybody even know anything about the Yazdi children or the Yazdi people that are from northwestern Iraq? This was on the Times of Israel, an article on September 20th, 2015. And it stated here that the Yazdi of Israel connection in traditional sources, there are references to a group of people called the Amagoshim. These are the same people referred to as the Magi in Christian sources. Most famous, the three Magi who visited Jesus after birth, identified by the many scholars as the Zoroastrian priest. Barir speculates that Amagoshim could refer equally to the Yazdis, and that the term is the origin of the English word magic, because both Zoroastrian priests and Yazdis are reputed magicians. The point being is that and by the way, they feel a very strong connection to Israel. So in closing, let me just share this with you here, this passage in Joel, and then it'll probably make more sense why I'm troubled by the events that are happening in Syria today, and any involvement that we don't want to be a part of. Joel chapter 3 verses 1 through 4 state, for behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land, and they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for an harlot and sold a girl for wine, that they might drink. Yea, and what have you to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon, and all the coast of Palestine? Will you render me recompense? And if you recompense me swiftly and speedily, will I return your recompense upon your own head? Did you notice that they sold a boy for a harlot and a girl for wine? And the Yazdi people, the little girl said, they would sell them for a couple of packs of cigarettes.